Hi. This session will focus on interpersonal and group dynamics, and the information should extend your thinking about teamwork that we discussed as part of the structural frame. As we've discussed, managers spend most of their time relating to other people, and the quality of these relationships largely determines their effectiveness in the work setting. As Thompson notes, adult patterns of interpersonal behavior are often shaped by socializing effects of family and society. In many instances, their personal and social needs may shape their management style. In other words, people bring their personal baggage to work. Consequently, their style may be out of sync with the needs of the organization. When their style diverges from organizational rules and requirements, it may result in their being ineffective. Understanding the nature of interpersonal relations and why some individuals are blind to self-defeating managerial behaviors may be accomplished through an examination of personal theories of competence, emotional intelligence, understanding roles and norms of behavior, as well as gaining insight into the nature of conflict and how groups and teams work. These are important domains of effective leadership. Argyris and Shern argue that individual behavior is controlled by their personal theories of action, or assumptions. They distinguish two kinds of theory: espoused theory, how individuals describe, explain, or predict their own behavior, in other words, what they say they do, and theories in use, the program that governs an individual's actions, or what they actually do. Argyris and Shern found significant discrepancies between espoused theories and theories in use. In other words, what people do often contradicts what they say they do. For example, managers describe themselves as more rational, open, concerned for others, and democratic than are viewed by their colleagues or subordinates. This blindness is a self-protective model of interpersonal behavior described as Model 1 and is viewed as an impediment to effective interpersonal relations. Let's take a closer look at Model 1. If a manager believes that the organization is a dangerous place where you have to look out for yourself, in other words, do unto others as they would do unto you, but do it first, you may use the following steps to influence others. Assume that the problem is caused by others. The core assumption may be described as, I'm okay, but you're not. Develop a private unilateral diagnosis of the problem. Since the other person is at fault, you may use 3 strategies to get them to change. Direct influence. Rational persuasion, facts, and logic. Tell others why you were right. Indirect influence. Ask leading questions and manipulate them. Direct critique. Tell the other person why they're wrong. If the other person resists or becomes defensive, it confirms that they caused the problem in the first place. Respond to their resistance by increasing pressure on the other person. If your efforts are not successful, it's the other person's fault. Model 1 behavior leads to minimal learning, strained relationships, and a deterioration of decision-making. This table summarizes Model 1 behavior in terms of core values, action strategies, consequences for relationships, and consequences for learning. Take a look at it. Argyris and Shern developed Model 2 that provides an alternative to Model 1 and is focused on achieving interpersonal effectiveness. It emphasizes the following assumptions: an emphasis on common goals and mutual influence patterns, open communication and publicly tested assumptions, integration of advocacy and inquiry. Advocacy includes statements that what you know and believe. Inquiry includes asking what others they think and believe. In other words, Model 2 integrates how a manager thinks and feels and actively seeks to understand the thoughts and feelings of others. Example, "This is how I see it. How do you see it?" This table depicts how different levels of advocacy and inquiry may produce different types of behaviors. You should notice that the integrative approach is high on advocacy and high on inquiry. The idea of managers engaging in self-protection is often referred to as skilled incompetence. When managers feel vulnerable or threatened, they revert to self-protection and deception to camouflage their inadequacy. Uncertainty and ambiguity makes it difficult to detect errors. In these circumstances, no one in the organization wants to be the messenger of bad news or the truth, and critical information never reaches decision makers. Managers often don't see the gap between what they say they do and what they actually do because they have a lot of help from others who are unwilling to place themselves in jeopardy. Let's take a look at emotional intelligence. Argyris's notion of interpersonal competence is very similar to Thorndike's definition of social intelligence that focused on acting wisely in human relations. Salvoni and Mayer found that individuals who scored high on the ability to perceive others' emotions could respond more flexibly to changes in their own social environment and were able to build supportive social networks. Many changes fail not because of managers' intentions are incorrect, but because they are unable to handle the social challenges of changing. For example, management by walking around may suggest greater accessibility, but dismissing work team suggestions as unworkable may kill their initiative, the exact opposite of what was intended. Daniel Goldman's management bestseller, Emotional Intelligence, points out that emotional intelligence, EI, is more important than IQ to managerial success. Individuals with low EI and high IQ are dangerous in the workplace. Theories advanced by Argyris and Schoen on interpersonal effectiveness and Salvoni and Mayer on emotional intelligence focus on universal competencies essential to leaders. Another research stream focuses on how individuals diverge in personality and leadership styles and how they may impact productivity and morale. Although we have discussed these previously, I'll summarize key findings. For example, Lewin, Lippitt, and White. In their classic study, they described autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire leadership styles, and found that people preferred the democratic leadership style, which produced positive group climate and higher productivity. Fleischman and Harris and Blake and Mouton described interpersonal leadership styles as having two dimensions: initiating structure and consideration of others. Effective supervisors tend to be high on both structure and consideration. The Myers-Briggs inventory is a popular tool for examining management styles that are composed of 4 juxtaposed dimensions: introversion versus extroversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and perceiving versus judging. Individuals fall into one of 16 possible types, none of which are universally better than another. However, it makes the case that interpersonal relationships may be less confusing and frustrating if an individual understands their own style as well as those of co-workers. Although Myers-Briggs inventory is widely used in management development, academic psychologists prefer the Big Five model that has stronger research support. It interprets personality in terms of 5 dimensions that typically includes extroversion, or enjoying other people and seeking them out, agreeableness, getting along with others, conscientiousness, orderly, planful, and hard-working behaviors, neuroticism, difficulty in controlling negative feelings, openness to experience, a preference for novelty and creativity. These studies suggest that understanding your own leadership style, as well as those of others in the workplace, may be positively related to improved interpersonal relations. Now let's turn to the idea of leading groups and teams. Most leadership theories are directed towards changing the behavior of individuals. However, managers and leaders also spend a majority of their time working in groups, self-managing teams, committees, and virtual groups. Groups operate at two levels, including a conscious task level and a process level that emphasizes group maintenance and interpersonal dynamics. There are four central issues related to group processes: informal roles, informal norms, interpersonal conflict, and leadership and decision-making. Let's look at informal roles first. In groups and organizations, the fit between the individual and the larger system is central to human resource concerns. In the structural frame, roles are formal and explicit. However, in the human resource frame, they tend to be informal and implicit. Explicit roles provide a structure that helps individuals understand who is going to do what. However, individuals also need a corresponding set of informal roles that satisfy their needs. Informal roles are unwritten and often unspoken expectations about how a particular individual should behave in a group. Role preferences. Individuals prefer different roles. Some prefer active roles in which they may exert some control, while others may stay in the background. Individuals who can't identify a comfortable role may either withdraw or become a troublemaker. Role competition. When individuals compete over the same role, two people who want to run things, it may hinder group effectiveness. The leadership challenge is to capitalize on individual strengths and minimize conflicts. Assigning task roles may be aligned with the knowledge and skills of group members. Explicitly identifying and assigning informal group roles contributes to highly effective teams. Let's look at this example. The group may agree that the person who has the most knowledge about the task at hand will play a specific role, and others will be assigned other specific supporting roles according to their respective skills and knowledge. Let's look at informal group norms. Informal group norms govern how the group functions and how members conduct themselves. In other words, how we do things around here. When rules are taken for granted and are internalized, they become accepted by members as unalterable social reality and guide member behavior. When group members adhere to these norms, it operates with considerable efficiency. When they don't, conflict may arise. Collaborative group members are expected to consult one another before taking action on an issue that may have consequences for the entire group. If a group member breaches this norm, other members will bring that individual into line or ostracize them. Informal group networks. Informal networks are patterns of who relates to whom and help shape the group. Informal bonds among members make a big difference. They tend to be more effective and more likely to stay together than groups in which members have fewer connections. A good example of this is a tightly knit football team. Let's take a brief look at interpersonal conflict. First, people like work. When interpersonal conflict arises, it must be handled correctly to ensure the group remains effective. Remember, conflict is normal. People have different goals, perceptions, and beliefs. When conflict arises, it can be handled in several ways. A Model 1 approach, a structural manager, will either pour oil on troubled waters, in other words, smooth it over and deny its existence, or might is right, my way or the highway. In this case, conflict goes underground and becomes more difficult to identify. Or you can take a Model 2 approach. That's the HR manager. That person may invest in developing the long-term capacity of the group to handle conflict by developing skills, listening, communicating, building consensus, agreeing on the basics, agree on goals and procedures, searching for interests in common, creating a larger framework for agreement among members, experimenting. Try out an idea before a decision is made, and learning may actually lessen the conflict. Doubt your own infallibility. Diversity of opinion is an asset and adds to learning. And finally, treat differences as a group responsibility. Shared leadership focuses on group interests, not on the interests of the leader. This figure depicts the conflict avoidance cycle. As you can see, when people avoid conflict, there's less examination of beliefs, less communication about learning, and increased difficulty in discussing conflict, which leads back to conflict avoidance. But we have to remember that conflict may be a source of learning if it uncovers deep organizational problems, cultural barriers to learning, clarifies issues, leads to shared understanding, and builds consensus. Let's take a brief look at leadership and decision-making in groups. A key issue in every group is how to create a shared sense of direction and commitment. If you lack structure, the group flounders, and if it's over-controlled, it loses creativity and commitment of its members. Hackman suggests that a key role of leaders is to set a compelling direction for the team that is energizing and generates a strong collective motivation to perform well. Druskett and Wheeler add another key leadership function in managing relationships with external constituents. Thus, the role of the leader may be viewed as moving back and forth across boundaries to build relationships, secure information, and persuade team members and external constituents to support one another, as well as empower their team to achieve success. Although leadership is essential, it need not come from one person. Groups do better with a shared or a fluid approach by regularly asking, who can take charge of this situation? Mayer found that leaders who over-control or under-structure may create frustration and contribute to group ineffectiveness. Good leaders are sensitive to both structure and process. This table summarizes how a manager may move from weak to strong communication skills that may mitigate the negative aspect of conflict. Let's look at how weak skills may be improved. For example, you language, accusing and blaming, can move to I think language that is much more diplomatic. Interrupting a speaker or holding side conversations may be replaced by active listening. And ad hominem or personal attacks may be replaced by focusing on issues, not the person. In conclusion, employees bring personal baggage and social needs with them to work and spend most of their time interacting with others. Because their social skills and competencies are essential to group and organizational effectiveness, we need to become more aware of our own as well as the behaviors of others and invest ourselves in developing these skills. Small groups are often criticized for being slow, but they can also be efficient and satisfying. However, managers and leaders need to understand how groups function and how they can provide both task structure and support decision-making processes. Thanks.